What happened next wasn't courage. It wasn't heroism. It was a decision no one prepares for. Aron Ralston, this isn't a story about escape. It's about the price survival demands, where breaking is not an option. The day began without wait. April sunlight poured into the Utah desert clean and sharp, the kind that makes everything feel possible. Aron Ralston parked his truck, shouldered his pack, and stepped into Blue John Canyon with the calm confidence of someone who had done this before, many times alone, by choice. There was no sense of urgency, no farewell messages, no feeling that anything needed to be remembered carefully. This was not recklessness, it was routine. Aron was 27, fit, precise, comfortable with solitude. He had spent years training his body and mind for wilderness travel, climbing, canyoneering, navigating tight spaces where the rock pressed close and the world narrowed to breath and balance. He liked the way canyons stripped life down to essentials. No noise, no audience, just movement, judgment, and gravity. He told no one where he was going, not because he didn't care, but because he didn't think he needed to. Blue John Canyon was familiar. Slot canyons like this were his element. Sculpted sandstone corridors carved by ancient water, walls rising so close they blocked the sky. They demanded attention, not fear. You moved carefully, tested holds, respected physics. Do that, and the canyon let you pass. The descent was smooth, controlled, almost meditative. He slid, climbed, wedged himself sideways through narrow gaps. Sunlight cut down in bright blades from above, illuminating dust motes that drifted lazily in the still air. His breathing was steady. His hands knew what to do before his thoughts caught up. This was freedom to him, not escape, but precision, being exactly where he chose to be. The canyon tightened, walls curved inward, polished by centuries of flash floods. The ground dropped unevenly in places, requiring short downclimbs. Aron moved without hesitation, shifting his weight, lowering himself into a narrow passage where a large boulder rested between the walls. It looked stable. It had always looked stable. He stepped down, one foot searching for purchase, one hand bracing against the rock. The boulder shifted just slightly, enough to change everything. There was no warning, no dramatic buildup. The rock moved. Gravity finished the thought. The boulder fell, rotating as it dropped, slamming Aron's right arm against the canyon wall. The impact was instantaneous, absolute. Bone met stone, flesh compressed into nothing. The sound was dull, final. The boulder settled. Aron screamed once, not from pain, but shock. The noise ricocheted off the canyon walls and vanished upward, swallowed by stone. He tried to pull his arm free. It didn't move. He shifted his body, braced his legs, pushed with everything he had. The rock did not respond. It sat there, unmoved, holding his arm like it had always been there. Pain arrived late, then all at once white, electric, consuming. His vision blurred. His mouth went dry instantly. He forced himself to breathe. This wasn't panic yet. This was assessment. He looked at his arm. It was pinned at the forearm, crushed between the boulder and the wall. Blood seeped slowly, dark against pale skin. The hand beyond the rock was already beginning to change color. He tried again. Nothing. He pushed the boulder with his free hand, then with his legs, then with his shoulder, muscles screaming as he strained against a force that didn't acknowledge him at all. The canyon remained indifferent. Minutes passed, or maybe seconds. Time stretched oddly, elastic and unreliable. He stopped struggling. Silence rushed in. The canyon was quiet in a way that felt aggressive, not peaceful, but absolute. No wind reached this far down. No animals moved. Even his own breathing sounded too loud, intrusive. Aron laughed once, short and sharp, disbelief leaking out before he could stop it. This couldn't be happening. He checked his gear. Rope, harness, a small multi-tool clipped to his pack. Water limited, but enough for a day trip. A couple of snacks. A video camera he often used to record climbs. Nothing that could move a boulder weighing hundreds of pounds. He tried digging around the rock with his fingers, scraping at sand and debris, desperate for leverage. The stone shifted a millimeter, then locked again, heavier than before. The pain intensified, radiating up his arm, into his chest, his neck. His heartbeat thudded hard in his ears. Still, his mind resisted the truth forming at the edges. Someone will come. That thought arrived easily, comfortingly. He had passed hikers earlier. This canyon wasn't completely remote. Rescue was possible. He just had to wait. He adjusted his position to ease the pressure on his arm. Biting back, a groan as bone shifted against bone. His arm felt wrong, no longer entirely part of him, more like an object trapped beside him. He checked the sun's position, high but already moving. Light crept across the canyon walls in slow, deliberate motion. Time had started moving differently now. He called out. His voice echoed briefly, then disappeared. No response came back. The sound died quickly, absorbed by rock and distance. He called again, louder. The canyon answered only with his own voice returning to him, distorted and hollow. He fell silent. The reality settled heavier with each minute. This place did not see him, did not care. He was not injured in a dramatic way. He was not bleeding out. He was simply stuck. And stuck meant time. Time meant thirst, hunger, exposure. Time meant thinking. The canyon didn't move. The rock didn't move. And neither could he. The first night came quietly. No dramatic shift. No signal that something irreversible had begun. The sun slid away above the canyon walls. and the light thinned until the stone around Aron turned the color of old ash. Shadows stretched, then fused into one long darkness. He was still trapped exactly where he had been all afternoon. His arm throbbed in deep, rhythmic pulses. Not sharp pain anymore, worse. A heavy, grinding sensation that felt permanent, like his body had already accepted this as its new shape. He checked his watch. Time still worked. That felt important. He drank a small sip of water, careful, measured. The bottle was light in his hand, too light. He told himself it was fine. One day, maybe two, someone would notice his truck. Someone would walk this canyon. Someone always did. He talked to himself to keep the silence from closing in. Out loud, calmly, as if narrating a problem he would solve. "Okay," he said. "This is temporary." The word sounded reasonable in the narrow space. Temporary. Problems were temporary. That was how he had always lived: solve, move on, repeat. He tried the boulder again. Different angles, different pressure. He wedged his back against one wall and pushed with his legs, veins standing out in his neck. Pain flared, blinding, but the rock didn't acknowledge him. It didn't grind, didn't crack. It just stayed. He laughed again, softer this time. Denial didn't vanish all at once. It thinned slowly, like water evaporating. As the temperature dropped, the canyon grew colder. The desert released heat quickly, without apology. Aron shivered, muscles tensing involuntarily, sending fresh jolts of pain through his trapped arm. He adjusted his pack to insulate himself as best he could. Sat, stood, sat again. There was no position that didn't hurt. Sleep came in fragments. Short, shallow lapses where his head drooped forward and jerked back up. Each time he woke, the situation returned fully formed, unchanged, waiting. Morning light crept back in, pale and indifferent. Day 2. He rationed immediately. One sip of water every few hours. A small bite of food. His mouth was already dry, tongue thick, but discipline felt like control, and control felt like survival. He carved his name into the canyon wall with the blade of his multi-tool. Aron Ralston, April 2003. The act felt ceremonial. Not surrender, exactly, but acknowledgement. Proof that he had been here. That this wasn't a hallucination, wasn't a bad thought he could shake away. He talked to the camera that day. Not dramatically, not tearfully, just explaining the situation, the logic, the expectation of rescue. He smiled at points, forcing normalcy into the frame. This is temporary. He still believed it. The second night was harder. Cold pressed in from every direction. His body ached with fatigue layered on pain, layered on thirst. He dreamed of water streams, bottles, condensation dripping slowly from rock. He woke with his lips cracked and bleeding. The canyon stayed silent. By the third day, the bargaining began. He promised himself things, changed habits in his head, made deals with a future that might never exist. "If I get out of this," he whispered, "I'll tell people where I'm going." He pressed his forehead against the stone, eyes closed, breathing shallow. He tried the rock again. Once, twice. The effort left him shaking, nauseous, dizzy. Reality crept closer now, not as panic, but as math. Water minus days, strength minus hours, blood flow minus pressure. He looked at his trapped arm again. The hand beyond the rock was swollen, discolored, no longer fully his. When he pinched it, sensation lagged, dulled, delayed. His body was already letting go of it. Still, hope lingered. Hope didn't shout. It whispered. It said, "Maybe tomorrow." It said, "Just hold on one more night." As the sun dropped again, Aron stared upward at a slice of sky he couldn't reach. He still believed someone was coming. By the fourth day, time stopped behaving like time. Hours no longer stacked neatly. They bled into each other, thick and slow, measured not by the sun's movement, but by how often Aron's throat burned, how loudly his heart seemed to beat in his ears, how heavy his thoughts felt. Dehydration rewrote his body first. His mouth stayed open without him noticing, lips split and stiff, tongue swollen and useless. Every swallow felt like dragging sand down his throat. His urine had stopped. His skin felt tight, unfamiliar, like it belonged to someone else. He drank the last of his water deliberately, not desperately, not dramatically. He tipped the bottle, swallowed, and held it upside down afterward, just to be sure. When nothing came out, he capped it and placed it back in his pack, as if pretending it still had a purpose. Thirst did not scream. It whispered constantly. His arm was mostly numb now. Pain flared occasionally, sharp and disorienting, but long stretches passed where it felt distant, detached. His body was making choices without consulting him, redirecting blood, shutting systems down. At night, the cold gnawed deeper. He shivered uncontrollably, muscles spasming, teeth chattering until his jaw ached. He wrapped himself as best he could, but the canyon stripped heat mercilessly. Sleep came with hallucinations. He saw movement where there was none, heard voices that dissolved when he focused on them. Once, he was certain he heard his name spoken clearly, close enough to touch. He lifted his head, heart racing, breath caught halfway between hope and fear. Nothing. The canyon walls stared back at him, unchanged. He began filming again. This time, the camera was not for record. It was for goodbye. He spoke to his parents first. His voice was calm, steady, almost gentle. He thanked them, apologized for not telling anyone where he was going. He avoided saying the word die, but it hovered between sentences, undeniable. Then he spoke to people who weren't there. Friends, future versions of himself. A life he had assumed would continue automatically. At some point, something shifted. panic, not despair, acceptance. It settled slowly, like dust after a collapse. He stopped imagining rescue, stopped listening for footsteps. The canyon was no longer a place he would leave. It was a place he would finish. That thought should have broken him. Instead, it clarified everything. With acceptance came memory. He saw himself older, not vividly, but unmistakably, standing somewhere warm, laughing, holding a small child by the hand. The image arrived fully formed, uninvited, and impossible to ignore. A future, not abstract, specific. He felt it like a physical presence, as real as the rock pinning him in place. And suddenly, death felt premature. That was the moment the line appeared. This is how it ends, unless I end something else first. The idea surfaced quietly, not violent, not frantic, just logical. He looked at his trapped arm, not with hatred, not with fear, with evaluation. He pressed on the bones above the rock, felt where they resisted, where they flexed. He remembered something he'd learned long ago, how much force it took to break a bone, how the body responded to extreme trauma. The idea was impossible, which meant it was the only one left. He didn't act immediately. He sat with it, let it exist without chasing it away. He tested it mentally, turned it over, followed it to its end. Pain, blood, uncertainty, survival afterward if he didn't pass out first. He laughed once, dry, cracked, almost soundless. Of course, this was the choice. Not heroism, not madness, just arithmetic. He checked his multi-tool. The blade was dull, inadequate, laughably unprepared for what he was considering. He closed it again. Night fell. The canyon cooled. The stars appeared in a narrow ribbon overhead. Aron stared at them, not searching for meaning, just taking inventory of the world he was still part of. Tomorrow, he decided. If there was a tomorrow, the impossible idea stayed with him, patient, waiting for daylight. Morning arrived without mercy. The sun crept down the canyon walls, touching the rock before it touched him, as if even light hesitated to reach this place. Aron watched it move, aware that this day was different from the ones before. Not because of hope, because of resolve. He did not rush. That mattered. Panic would have killed him faster than thirst. What he was about to do required clarity, not courage. Precision, not strength. He took inventory. His arm was still pinned, swollen, discolored, largely numb below the rock. Above it, sensation remained, enough to feel pressure, pain, reality. The boulder had not shifted even a fraction overnight. The canyon had already cast its vote. He spoke once, quietly, to no one. This is it. Then he prepared. He braced his feet against one wall, his back against the other, creating the most stable position he could manage. He adjusted his body so that if he lost consciousness, he might slump safely rather than fall awkwardly and bleed out. These were not heroic thoughts. They were procedural. He opened the multi-tool. The blade was short, dull, never meant for this. He tested it lightly against his skin, not to hurt himself, but to confirm something important, that he could still feel enough to know what was happening. He could. That mattered too. He began with the bones. There was a moment, brief, almost polite, where his mind tried to interrupt, offered alternatives, delays, 1 more hour, 1 more attempt, 1 more imaginary rescue. He ignored them. He applied pressure. The sound was worse than the pain. A deep, internal crack that traveled up his arm and into his chest, vibrating through his skull. His body reacted instantly, violently, muscles spasming, breath tearing out of him in a raw, uncontrolled sound. He did not scream for long. He couldn't afford to. He waited for the shock to crest and pass. It did, eventually, leaving behind something colder and sharper. Focus narrowed. Vision tunneled. The world reduced itself to immediate tasks. He broke the second bone deliberately. Not cleanly, not easily. It took everything he had left. When it was done, he rested his forehead against the canyon wall, panting, saliva stringing from his mouth, heart hammering so hard he thought it might rupture. He felt lightheaded, distant, as if watching himself from somewhere above. He did not allow himself to drift. Passing out here would mean bleeding without control, mistakes without correction. He waited until the shaking eased. Then he turned the blade toward flesh. He worked slowly, carefully. There was no room for hesitation now, but there was also no room for haste. He cut with intention, separating what could be separated, pausing when pain surged too high, continuing when it receded enough to allow movement. The pain was total, not sharp, not sudden, expansive. It filled his awareness completely, crowding out thought, memory, time. There was no screaming inside his head, just an overwhelming demand to stop that he refused to answer. He focused on mechanics, grip, angle, pressure. Blood flowed, but not as catastrophically as fear suggested it would. The tourniquet he fashioned held. His preparation mattered. His planning mattered. Minutes stretched into something indistinct. When it was finished, there was no triumphant moment, no rush of relief, just a sudden, disorienting absence where his arm had been. He was free. He stared at the space beside him, breath ragged, mind struggling to catch up with reality. Then the second truth arrived, heavy and unavoidable. Freedom was not the end. He rappelled down the remaining canyon using one arm, legs trembling, body screaming in protest. Every movement threatened collapse. He stumbled, fell, stood again. He drank from stagnant pools without hesitation. Water was water now. Hours later, how many? He did not know. He emerged from the canyon into open space. Sunlight hit him fully for the first time in days. He squinted, overwhelmed by the width of the world. He took a step forward, then another. He was free, but now he had to survive it. The canyon released him without ceremony. No boundary marked the moment he left it behind. No sound changed. The walls simply widened. The sky opened. And suddenly Aron was no longer enclosed by stone. He stood in open desert, bleeding, dehydrated, one arm gone, the other barely steady enough to keep him upright. Freedom felt unreal. His body shook violently now, no longer held together by adrenaline alone. Shock crept in, slow and heavy. Every step sent pain up through his legs, into his spine, rattling what little strength remained. He wrapped what was left of his arm as tightly as he could. The tourniquet held, but barely. Blood loss was controlled, not solved. Nothing about this was solved yet. He had miles to go. He started walking, not fast, not bravely, deliberately. He counted steps, focused on rhythm. Left foot, right foot, breathe. Stop, breathe again. The desert stretched out, vast and indifferent, sunlight harsh on his cracked skin. His vision blurred at the edges. Several times he stumbled, catching himself just before falling. Falling would end everything. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time had lost its shape again, but differently now, not suffocating, just thin and fragile. He reached a rappel point he remembered from earlier trips. Muscle memory guided him where conscious thought could not. With one arm, he set the rope, tested it, trusted it. Then he descended. Every movement screamed danger. His legs shook uncontrollably. His grip slipped once, briefly, sending a jolt of terror through him that nearly broke his focus. But he made it down, collapsing at the bottom, gasping, laughing weakly at nothing. He was still alive. That mattered more than anything else. He stood again and kept moving. Somewhere along the trail, voices appeared, real this time. 3 hikers approached from the opposite direction. They stopped abruptly when they saw him gaunt, sunburned, bleeding, one arm missing entirely. For a moment, no one spoke. Then one of them stepped forward. They gave him water. He drank too fast, then slowed when he realized he couldn't afford to waste it. They helped him sit. One of them wrapped his arm more securely, hands shaking as they worked. Help had arrived, not as a miracle, but as a continuation. A helicopter came later. The sound filled the air, loud and undeniable. As it lifted him away from the desert floor, Aron looked down at the canyon one last time. It did not look defeated. It looked exactly as it always had. Recovery was long. Pain lingered in ways he hadn't anticipated, not just physical, but psychological. He replayed the days in his mind endlessly. The choices, the silence, the moment where life narrowed to a single, irreversible decision. He did not regret it, but he did not celebrate it either. Living with the choice meant carrying it forward into relationships, into memory, into a future that now felt earned rather than assumed. survival had not made him fearless. If anything, it sharpened fear, gave it edges and weight. He learned what hesitation costs. He learned what clarity demands. He did not escape the canyon. He paid the price to leave it.